Hello everyone, in this week's video, I'm drawing one of my viewers' original characters. But before we start, there's something I want to talk to you all about. I know that many of you that watch my videos are also artists and are possibly looking for ways to share your art with others. Earlier this year, I started creating stories on Amino and it has been a great way to share my art with a new audience. The great thing about Amino stories is that pretty much anybody with a great idea and a phone can make them. So if you're a creator or artist, you can simply log on to creator.aminoapps.com, sign up using your Amino username, and once your first story is approved, start building an audience and getting paid to create. You can join the Amino creators today by clicking the link in the description or by visiting creators.aminoapps.com. Thank you so much to Amino for sponsoring this video. Now let's see whose character I'm drawing. So this character was created by Bean. The character's name is Zoe. Zoe is super bubbly and loud. She is a really springy and happy character without a care in the world. She laughs a lot and tells a lot of jokes. So let's start drawing Zoe. So usually for my I Draw Your OC series, I like to randomly pick the characters because it forces me to kind of draw new things and push myself out of my comfort zone. But this week I was feeling kind of art blocky and like I didn't want to draw. I really just didn't feel like drawing, so I needed something to inspire me, and so for this episode of I Draw Your OC, I let myself pick the character. I was scrolling through all the different characters that were submitted to me, and then I came across Zoe and I just thought she was so cute, and I love drawing deer characters with antlers. I also really liked the sunflowers that were behind her in her picture, and that just inspired me to draw a whole bunch of sunflowers. I don't know, I just really wanted to draw a field with tons of sunflowers in it, and so that's what I decided to do for this. And so I have Zoe in a field of sunflowers, and she's also holding some sunflowers. And for the sunflowers, I wanted them to kind of have a painty look. And right now I'm just kind of sketching them out and trying to get an idea for where I want all the sunflowers to be. And to sketch them out, I just use different colors. I don't plan to do line art for the sunflowers because I want them to have that more painty and loose kind of look to them. And now that I have my sketch in place, I'm moving on to the line art, and the line art this time is a little different from my other videos. I decided to use the rough pencil. Usually I use the G pen, and it gives me really clean line art with a very hard edge. But I wanted my line art to look a little softer for this picture. I wanted it to just feel more soft and organic, and so I used the rough pencil, and I actually really enjoyed using this for my line art. I want to use it again for line art in the future. I don't know, it was just so much fun to use, and I like the slight texture it has, and it has a slightly softer look. I also kind of wanted to keep my line art feeling kind of loose and soft, and I was trying to do really flowy lines. I had so much fun drawing her hair, it's so floofy. And her antlers were also really fun. I actually had a bit of trouble with her antlers. I had to trace over the picture that was submitted to get an idea of what her antler shape was, and then I'd kind of tweak it and I put it onto my version of Zoe. I couldn't get the shape right. Also, for the bottom parts of her hair, I don't have it connect. I have like this one tuft of hair, and then I have the rest of her pigtails. And in the middle, I'm going to put the puffy thing that's kind of holding her hair. I don't do line art for that. I just use one of the watercolor brushes that kind of look a little fuzzy. So after doing the line art, I filled in the base colors for Zoe. And I'm starting to work on the background. Before working on Zoe, I wanted to get the background really in place because I knew that was going to be the challenging part of this picture. I felt pretty confident with Zoe and how her shading was going to be, and I kind of knew what I wanted to do for her. And so I wanted to try to really figure out the background. For the background, I have some hills in the back, and I'm going to have some trees. I used the rough pencil for this, and I made it kind of softer, and I kind of just made some abstract shapes that look sort of like trees. And I'm going to blur these out later so they're not as much in focus. And now I'm moving on to the sunflowers. I'm starting by working on the sunflowers that are really close to us. And I am using the dense watercolor brush for this. I wanted to use some of the watercolor brushes because they kind of have a slightly softer edge to them and they make the paint and colors all kind of blend together. And so I made the shape of the sunflower and then I blurred it out and then I applied some Add Glow to it just to make it kind of pop and stand out. One thing I kept doing when I was working on the sunflowers is I kept wanting to make the petals way too long. I kept having to remind myself that compared to the middle of the flower, the petals aren't super long, because a lot of time with most flowers I draw, compared to the middle, the petals are really long, but with sunflowers, it's kind of the opposite. And so I was drawing a whole bunch of different layers of the petals for the sunflowers, and I tried to keep using different shades of yellow to separate the different petals of the flowers. And so I drew this kind of main flower that she's holding, and I used this main flower a lot for the other flowers. I'm going to be copying and pasting it and then transforming it with the mesh transform selection, and I'm going to be using that flower in the background quite a bit. The sunflowers, I think, took up the most time in this picture. I actually didn't work on Zoe like that much, but I worked on the sunflowers for a really long time. But it was really fun because it was really kind of different from what I usually kind of do, and I do really enjoy drawing flowers and I want to get better at drawing them. And yeah, I had a lot of fun. Now I'm kind of working more on the stems for the sunflowers, and one thing I noticed is that sunflowers have really big leaves. When I was looking at pictures, I was like, wow, their leaves are really big. I'm also adding some baby's breath. I think that's what they're called, the little tiny white flowers. I love them so much when you see them in like flower arrangements and everything. I always think they're so pretty, so I added her holding some in her little bouquet of sunflowers. While I was doing this, I was looking at many different pictures of sunflowers because I was trying to draw them in different positions. I have a few in side view and also some from the back view. I always have a hard time drawing flowers from a side view. Now here's where I'm copying and pasting that main flower, and I kind of transform it to make it look like it's not the same flower. I kind of spin it around and transform it so it looks like it's slightly different shapes. That way I don't have to draw a ton of different sunflowers because I didn't want to be spending too long drawing all kinds of sunflowers because I was already spending quite a bit of time on it. But I still wanted them to kind of look organic and not look like they were copy and pasted, so I would kind of edit them a little bit and try to make them look different. I also had some sunflowers kind of all below the main sunflowers. And now I'm going in and I'm using the dot brush or something, and I'm making a whole bunch of yellow dots for the sunflowers that are way in the background, and so they'll be super tiny, and I'm gonna blur them out so they're not as much in focus. And that's what I do for all the flowers in the background. And I also take my one main flower and I copy and pasted it a whole bunch, and I made a whole bunch of rows of smaller sunflowers. I wanted to make sure the field felt like it had a lot of depth to it and like it was really filled with lots of sunflowers. It was a little tricky, and I was looking at many different references online, and I was trying my best to make it look like a field. I also apply some Add Glow to all the sunflowers just to make them kind of pop and look like they're kind of illuminating everything, even though like sunflowers don't emit light, but I wanted them to kind of add a warm glow to the picture. I also added some fog in the background to make the hills look like they're a little bit more distant, and I also blur out the trees and the hills, and that makes them look like they're really far away. Now I'm adding some rays of light. I'm imagining it's kind of in the morning. I wanted the lighting to be really soft and kind of pretty. I didn't want it to be super harsh. Kind of like when I do sunset pictures, I use a whole bunch of crazy colors and the shading is kind of harsh, but I wanted this to be kind of like a soft morning glow, so I'm adding some lighting around the edge of Zoe because she's kind of being backlit, and so I added a whole bunch of lighting all around the edges of her. And now I'm going in and shading her skin. I use a lot of purpley blues when shading Zoe because the shading in this lighting situation would be kind of a purpley blue color. I also try to add more warm colors to Zoe in areas that I wanted to make pop a little bit more. And so for her face, I erased the blue shadow layer I had over everything, and I got rid of a little bit of the shading on her face just to make it pop a little bit more. Now I'm moving on to the hair, and I actually tried something a little bit different today with the hair. Lately I've been thinking I want to change up my hair shading style, and so for this I wanted the shading to look really soft, and so I'm kind of shading it more how I shade clothing. And I apply the color for where I want it to be. So in this case, I applied some colors for the highlight, and then I blend it out with the blending tool, and I make it get pointed at the end, so I kind of get these little like strand details. And I just wanted it to look like really soft. Usually I use the pen tool and I make a whole bunch of small strokes like over and over and over again. But doing it this way makes it look a little softer. I don't know, what do you all think? Do you like this new hair shading style? I feel like I kind of like it. I had a lot of fun with it. I always like using the blending tool to blend out colors. But yeah, I had a lot of fun shading her hair. Now I'm moving on to shading her clothing, and the shading on her clothing went really smoothly. I did end up changing her one sleeve later because her sleeves kind of poof out at the ends, and so I had it poof out, but I don't know, like right here it just looks a little weird, like it's defying gravity, and so I changed that later because I don't really like this sleeve. I make it look a little bit more flat and wrinkly and like it's being affected by gravity, and I feel like it looks a lot better a little bit later. Now I'm starting to work on her eyes, and her eyes are super pretty. She has a light blue eye and a light yellow eye, and they were so much fun to work on. I always really like coloring really light colored eyes and just making them pop, and yeah, they're so much fun. I also added quite a bit of color inside of her pupils because in the picture that was submitted to me, her pupils are a darker version of her eye color. I prefer to keep the pupils black, but I added quite a bit of her eye color to the pupil just to lighten them up a little bit. And now I'm just kind of adding the little details to Zoe, like her little stripes on her collar and the little stripes on her sleeve. And this is where I'm like, yeah, I don't like the sleeve very much. And so I kind of just paint over it and edit the sleeve a little bit. I also add some shading to her antlers. I almost forgot about them. I was going through everything and trying to remind myself to shade everything, and I almost forgot to shade her antlers. And lastly, I'm just adding a little bit of effect lighting to everything. So I added some black along the bottom just to make the bottom area look a little bit darker and everything else a little lighter. And I also play around with my values and colors a little bit with some correction layers and just add all of the finishing touches. So here's the finished picture of Zoe. I had so much fun working on this picture and working on all the sunflowers, and it was just so much fun doing something new. Thank you so much to Bean for submitting your OC Zoe. I really enjoyed drawing her. Before I end this video, I want to say thank you so much to my patrons, including Andrew, Ty Loves Pandas, Dozar89, Pisotera, Master Zero, Tamalam, Rachel, Vani, Nav from Academia Games, Uziel, Lu6562, Robert, Ann, Eduardo, Michael, Narichan, Dan, Panda Bear, Hollow Studio, Trash Oracle, Daniel, Aaron, and Patrick. Thank you so much for being a patron and for your support. Well, thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!